Tech by Tips.
Welcome to another Tech by Tips video. We're going to continue with the Introduction to Azure DevOps series, and on this second video we're going to continue going into details about the topic that we mentioned on the last lesson, which is the projects, how to create the projects, and details about those projects. There's some things that I'm going to go into details on here, so let's get to that. So we're going to cover in this lesson first of all, the licensing for Azure DevOps, because that's something that we did not cover on the previous video. And we're going to talk about the project types and the visibility. And we're also going to be talking about the work item process. And we're going to see a little bit of the flow of those work items in the boards. So let's first start with the user licensing. The first thing that we're going to cover here is that there's basically two types of user licenses. In other words, when you pay per user, there's the basic plan, which is the one that we're using in this series, which is the one that gives you up to 5 users for free. And the licensing costs for users are based on the amount of users that you have in your organization. So if you have the basic plan, once you have more than 5 users, then you start paying $6 per user per month, as we see on the image on the right side. That's taken directly from the Azure DevOps website. And the basic does not include the test plans service, so you have to be aware of that. So you will not have access to the test plans in the basic plan. But if you want the basic including the test plans, or what they call the basic plus test plans, then you have access to the test plans, but you do not have access to those 5 free users. So for each user you would have to pay $52 per month. So that's basically the cost structure for the user licenses and what they include. But additionally, you have other type of cost for services. So instead of having a license for a user, you can also pay per service. Here's another screenshot of the website where you can see the details. And this specifically talks about the Azure pipelines and the Azure artifacts services. They all have like a basic free tier, we can say. The Azure pipelines includes one Microsoft hosted pipeline and one self-hosted pipeline. The Microsoft hosted pipeline has a limit of 1,800 minutes per month. The self-hosted one doesn't have a restriction on the amount of minutes. But once you pass that limit, like if you want a second Microsoft hosted pipeline, then you have to start paying $40 per parallel job. But the good thing is that they give you unlimited minutes in that case, and that's per parallel job a month. And then for the self-hosted ones, you pay $15 per extra job, and as usual, it doesn't have limits on the minutes. So that's the costs for the Azure pipelines. For the Azure artifacts, it's all based on the space that you're using, because you're storing artifacts on disk. So they give you 2 gigabytes of free space, and if you go over that, once you go to the 3rd gigabyte, then you have to pay $2 per, it's gigabytes, not gigabytes. You have to pay $2 per gigabyte that you have additionally for Azure artifacts. So that's the 2 types of costs that you can incur with your Azure DevOps. One is per user and the other one is by services. So now we can go ahead and talk about the project types. We kind of glanced over this for a little bit, but I want to give more details into that. We have the private project, which is the usual for companies where their code is, locked, is closed source, and is a default mode, and only users that are authorized by that organization can access the information in that Azure DevOps subscription. And it has limits on pipelines and agents, etc. And then you have the public project, which are geared for open source development. And this is by default disabled, so you have to do what we explained on the first video to enable it. But if you do enable it, then you have to know that anybody can read anything in that public project. They can see the source code, they can see the wikis, they can see everything. And it's unlimited for free read access users. But there are more resources for pipelines and agents than what you get in a private project. So that's the main thing that I wanted to highlight for this, which is the project types. So now we can move ahead and talk about the board work item process. So here we have a screenshot of all the work items that you can have in each of the 4 categories that you can choose when you build your project. But we have to understand that, first of all, Azure DevOps assumes that you're gonna be running your project in some kind of agile way. So it could be an agile project, it could be a Scrum project, it could be a capability maturity model integration project, or a new one that they created for people that don't really need all that detail, which is a basic project. Depending on what you choose is the work items that you have available. So in this case, we're gonna go over those and how they're organized. For the basic work item, which is the simplest one and is also the newest one that was created, is simplified for small teams that don't need a lot of accountability process-wise, right? They have 3 types of work items that you can use in the process. The first one is an epic. The epics are large bodies of work that can be broken into issues in this case. So the epic is the bigger one, and you can break an epic into issues, and then issues are moved into the sprints to plan and track the work that your team is going to take on and hopefully achieve, right? And they have states that define their status. So it can be to do, doing, or done. And then issues can also have a sub-item, which are tasks. And the tasks are things that you create so that you allow the rest of the team and management, etc., to see the progress of that issue. And also for yourself, you can track the progress of the issue if you're the one working on it. And it showcases the elements of the work that is, has to be performed to consider the issue completed. So that's the basic work item process and the work items that are available. So let's move now into the Agile work item process. In this one, this is the default. This is the one that by default is going to be assigned to a project if you don't change it, because this is the one that most organizations use. And this has the typical Agile work items, which are the epics, which is the same as before. It's a large body of work that can be broken down, but in this case, it's broken down into features. And features are basically functionality that delivers business value and fulfills a stakeholder need. But those features can also be broken down into user stories. And those user stories is what you move into the sprint to plan and to track the work. And they also have different states that you can use to define their status. And those are new, active, resolved, closed, and removed. And they're written from the perspective of a specific user. So when you write a story, it's written in a very specific way that helps you understand what's the work that has to be done. That also has an analog, which is a bug, which is like a user story, but this user story is related specifically to defects or problem with the functionality. So if you're trying to fix something that was done but it has problems, it would be a bug. And if it's something new, then it would be a user story. And then the user stories and the bugs can also be broken down into tasks. And the tasks, like before, they exist to showcase the elements of work that you have to perform to complete the user story or the bug, and it serves to show the team what the progress of that is, so everybody can see how the story or the bug is moving along. Once all the tasks are completed, then you can close the story or the bug. And that's for the Agile work item process. So now let's move into the CMMI work item process. In this one, it's very similar to the Agile work item process, but the main difference is that what before used to be called a user story, in this work item process is called a requirement. But all the other parts are the same. You have the epic, which is a large body of work that can be broken down into features, which specifically talks about the functionality that is going to be delivered. And then that feature is going to be broken down into requirements. And those requirements are what you move into the sprint to plan and to track the work. And their status is different from the Agile in that it can be proposed or active or resolved or closed. And just as with the Agile, there's also the bug, which is an analog of the requirement, and that's to deal with problems or defects with things that have done before. And as usual with the Agile process, you can break that down into tasks that you can then move around, and then you can see where you are in working in that requirement or bug, and if it showcase the progress. And once all the tasks are closed, then you can close your bug or your requirement. And that's all for the CMMI work item. So let's go into the last one that we have available, which is the Scrum work item process. In this work item process, once again, it's pretty similar to the Agile and CMMI, but the user story, it's named a PBI, or a product backlog item. And it works the same way. You have the epic that breaks down into features, that breaks down into PBI, and the PBIs is what you move into the sprint to plan and to track the work. But their state can be new or approved or committed or done or removed. And then, just like with the user stories, you can have an analog, which is a bug, which is to work on problems from before. And for both the PBIs and the bugs, you can also create tasks to track the progress of the PBI or the bug, and to showcase how the PBI or the bug is moving along. And that's the last work item process, which is the Scrum one. So we're gonna go now and see all of that in action in the Azure DevOps platform. We're back in our DevOps organization, and if you see here, you'll see new things that we didn't have in the previous video. Basically, I created 4 projects that correspond to each specific work item process, so that we can see the differences between them. But if you remember, for that you would click on new project, you would give it a name, and then on advanced here is where you pick the work item process that you want to use. So let's go quickly into the basic one. In the basic one, you'll see this when you start on it. So to work on the work items for a project, you have to first go into the boards section. When you go here into the boards, the first thing you'll see is it takes you immediately to the work items option here. And in here is where you would see a list, or like a backlog, of all the things within your project. And here's where you can create things. And remember that screenshot from before, that screenshot comes from here. When you click here where it says new work item, you have a drop down that gives you the 3 types of items that you can create. And when you create an item, for example, let's start with an epic, which is the top level. Then it prompts you for details about the epic. Let's just put some random information, sample epic, and then you would put a description here about your epic. And then when you go here into the state, right now it has to do, but when we save this, we'll see something interesting. So let's save this. And now that we saved it, then we see all the states that we were talking about before. We have the to do, the doing, and the done. Since this is not in a sprint and nobody's working on it, you would just leave it in the to do, which is the first state that you can have. And that's it. Now you have a sample epic, so we can go back into the work items, and here it shows. It's not assigned to anyone, its state is to do. And it tells you when it was created. And now we can create another type of work item, which would be an issue. So again, I'm not going to go into details, but we're going to put sample issue. And here again, we will only see to do until we actually save it. So I want to showcase something important here. Let me save this first. Okay, so now you'll see the 3 states, but here's what I wanted to showcase. You have to link your items together in the hierarchical order of it. So we have an issue, but on top of the issue we have the parent object, and currently if we go here where it says add link, there's nothing. So we have to click on this link, add an existing work item as a parent, and then we look here for our sample epic. In this case, it's showing me the epic here, but it's also showing me another one from another project, so ignore that one. So when we add the link, now we have the epic here, and we can see that. So I know that it's this one because we have the ID number 4. If this is ID number 5, then this one was the one I created previously, so that's the right one. So if we save this, then they're linked together. And when we go back into the work items, then we can see that we have our epic and we have our issue. And if we go into the issue is linked to the epic. And if we go to the epic, then we see that issue that we linked is also included with a link, but as a child. So we always have that hierarchy. And then if we go and create a new work item for a task, you can have multiple tasks for an issue. So we can say, for example, sample task 1, and then we go here in the link and we look for the parent, which is the issue number 5. So we add that link and we save that, and we can go back into the work items, and now we have a sample task that is associated with the sample issue that is associated with the sample epic. So we can see that everything gets nicely put together and making hierarchical sense. And if we add another task, because like we said, we can have multiple tasks for the issue, then we can say this is a sample task 2, and we put it with the parent as that issue. Then we will see that when we go back and we go back to the issue, it has 2 children, which are the 2 tasks. Normally the tasks are populated when the sprint is active and going, so normally you wouldn't be putting tasks in the backlog. So you would leave only like the epics and the issues mainly, and then once the sprint starts, then the people that has the issue assigned can create those tasks to organize the work. So this is the basic look of how to create the new work items, but then this is something important. We remember that we talked about the status of the items, right? If we go into the boards, in the board, you'll see that we have those statuses here. So we have to do, we have doing, and we have done. So currently we have here the issue that we created. So this issue is currently on the to-do state, but the nice thing about how Agile works and how the Azure DevOps boards work is that you can just drag it into another status, and then when you go back, you see the state changed. So if we put it in doing, we go and it says doing. So it's really nice, and everybody can come into the board and see what's going on. In this case, if we had the tasks, then we can see the status of each of the tasks, and then things will be moving along. So for example, if we have the issue in doing, then we'll see that the tasks are being worked on or the tasks are done. Once all the tasks are done, then you can move the issue into done and everything should be done. So that's the basic. Let's now move into the Agile project. So let's go into the Agile project here. Once again, if we want to create work items, we're going to go into boards, which will take us directly into the work items. I have already populated this. So in this case, I want to showcase very specifically like examples of how do you usually write the features, the epics, and the user stories in Agile. In Agile, the highest level is the epic. So that's the first thing that you should have. And in there, you usually just have a description that says what you want to achieve in this epic, right? So let's say we have a website that is like a bookstore, and in a bookstore you have to have different things. So the first epic that you can have, for example, is we want to have a book catalog in our website that displays all the books that we have available for sale, because that's the main thing that you care about, right? Having that available to the public so they can see the books that you have for sale. And then you also want to make sure that within this epic, when you click on the book, you see details about the book. So that's the main thing you want to do, like the overview, the high level, the bird's eye view of what you want to achieve here in this epic. So then that epic is broken down like we said, into features. So we can have a feature, for example, that says display a catalog of all the books in the store. And then the catalog should show the books and people can click on them and see the details. And the catalog can be sorted by price, for example, or by category, like for example if it's comedy or fiction or history, or by language, for example, if it's in English, if it's in Japanese, if it's in Spanish. And that's basically the feature that we want to complete, right? And then that feature is tied to the epic, and it's also tied to a story. And if we go into that story, then this is the main important thing that I think everybody should be really aware of, is how you write a story. A user story usually is written in the form of, as an entity, I need to action to perform so that I can get an outcome. So in this case, an example would be, for example, as a customer, I need to have an option to create a new book and provide its details so that it shows up in the store. In this case, customer would be like our stakeholder, the owner of the store, for example, or a person that works for the store, right? So you have to provide a person that you're acting as, what you need to do, and then what's going to be the benefit of that. So that's usually how you write a user story. And another very, very important thing that any good agile process has is that you have to have your acceptance criteria. So that means that in order for this story to be closed, all of this should be met. For example, there should be a link to create a new book in the administrator console. There should be a form that prompts for the details of the book, and that should be, for example, the author, the title, the format, the price, the publisher, the date of publication, the language, and the category. And once you submit that form, a book entry gets added to the database and is displayed in the books section. And then you have to make sure that you check all the boxes here so that then you can close the user story. So then this is also very good because this helps you to create the tasks that you're going to be doing to tackle this story. So you can have, for example, adding the link to create a new book is one task. Another task is create the form that prompts for all of this information. And another task is storing that information in the database. And another task is validating that the book is then displayed in the catalog, for example. So this is how you write a good agile story. And as you can see here, this is tied to things. So it's currently tied to the feature, and that feature is tied to the epic. So everything is nicely organized and makes sense. And if we go into the boards again, we'll see that we have different states for our stories. So in this case, we have new, active, resolved, and closed. And as usual, like we explained before, you can move your stories along those lanes to showcase the status of your work. So that's it for the agile process. And here will be what a CMMI project is like. When you go into the work items, then you can click here and you'll have all the things that you have available to create. I'm not going to go through all of these because it's way too many things to cover, and that's not really the point of this. So it will work the same way. You create a thing, you put the details. If you need to link it to any other item, you can do that also, and you'll see them here. And then when you go into the board, then you'll see that the state is different again: proposed, active, resolved, and closed, like we mentioned in the PowerPoint before. And then for the last one, which is the Scrum project, we can create work items the same way. It's basically very, very similar to the Agile, but we have a product backlog item instead of a user story. And when we go into the board, we'll see that the status is different. It's new, approved, committed, and done. So we have seen all the things that we discussed in the PowerPoint, and I think that's going to be good. That's going to be enough for this second video. We're going to be going into more details on all the different aspects that you have here of Azure DevOps. So we're going to leave it here. We'll see you on the next video. Thank you for being here. Hope you're enjoying this and you're learning a lot about Azure DevOps, because it's a great platform to use and to learn. So see you on the next one.